Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sara Javed Rathore, and today I have been honored with the task of moderating this panel titled The Art of the Play that features some immensely talented guests. This exceptional talent is one that I would like to introduce you all to. First of all, we have Clemens Berger, who is an Austrian author whose literary repertoire includes several acclaimed novels and plays. He blends an undercurrent of political humor, beautifully discussing the nitty-gritty details of our society. Next, we have Fatima Amjed, who is a dancer, an artist, and has directed Kaur, an ode to Punjab and its intricacies. It's such a beautifully directed play, and I hope it's one that piques our interest in our own culture and our own heritage. Next, we have Jaffri, a filmmaker, actor, and director. She has starred in both Jewels and The Queen of Dreams, and very recently directed the brilliant play, The White Plague. And lastly, we have Lucy Fricke, a powerhouse in writing. Her novel, Daughters, was published to much acclaim and was also adapted into a film. I know you have worked mainly in fiction and briefly film, but that grants you the nuance and perspective that we need on a panel that is mostly discussing theater. Theater, if I talk about it, is such a timeless medium that has maintained its relevance despite the rise of countless other forms of entertainment. When I talk about theater, I would like to mention Aristotle and his Poetics. In his Poetics, Aristotle mentions that when you look at theater or you watch a tragic play happen, you have this sense of purgation and catharsis when you experience those emotions. And it allows audience to confront what they repress. From Sophocles to Shakespeare, plays have bridged a gap between the performers and the audiences, offering powerful shared experiences. And in contemporary Pakistan, theater carries the deep influence of colonization while also craving out a distinct Pakistani identity. Our theater blends dialogues, dance, and music, intertwining indigenous performance with modern narratives. It is a space where our cultural values shine through with the dynamic storytelling. And it is institutions like Alhamra which play a crucial role in preserving this tradition. They not only celebrate our rich heritage, but also push boundaries, ensuring that Pakistani theater remains a vibrant and evolving form. And with this, I would like to direct the first question at Clemens. Whether it's your play, The Angel of the Poor, which is a black comedy, or it's your novels, which include The House of Liquid Gold, comedy is a very common thread present in many of your works. Is there a specific reason why you choose a comedic streak to represent these very, very serious ideas?
Yeah, I mean, probably because sometimes you don't know what's the difference between comedy and tragedy, and it's sometimes both at the same time. And I wouldn't even always call it comedy, but maybe humor and some kind of wit, because, for example, you talked about the play which is called Angel of the Poor, and it's about a cut rate undertaker. He's the cheapest of all, and he calls himself Angel of the Poor because he tells himself and his clients and everyone else, and the lapel on his, the diamond on his lapel, which really is his mother, who he had pressed into a diamond, that he is a good person, that he is the angel of the poor, that even poor people who can't afford a burial at normal rates and normal prices, etc., etc. So what I think, it's the comical in people who take themselves very seriously. That's maybe one of the approaches and why I put things more or less into a comical perspective sometimes, because things are hard enough, and sometimes it's a relief and better to laugh about it and to laugh about people who take themselves too seriously.
I mean, that's a lovely response, Clemens, and I agree that especially in the current political climate, it's so difficult to navigate these issues, and when you represent them with a humorous streak, it becomes so important to, understand that there is depth behind them, seriousness behind them, but at the same time you're allowed to laugh at your own misery. Again, the idea of purgation that I was talking about. And in the same vein, I will now direct my question towards Meher, because I had the wonderful opportunity of watching your play, The White Plague, and you it's an adaptation of Čapek's play from 1938. It was written in Czech originally, and it shows the superpower preparing for a war in a world that is being ravaged by a mysterious illness, a pandemic of sorts. And this is so relevant and true to our times. You know, is it a possibility for you to play the trailer for us to give the audience more perspective?
Yeah, I think if they can cue in the trailer. Oh, is there audio?
ये इस खतरनाक तरीन बीमारी का इलाज ढूंढा जा चुका है। शूटिंग सिंड्रोम, लातादाद मरीज, बेइंतहा शोर, लोग कहेंगे नया मसीहा पैदा हो गया है।
कल मैं अपने सफेद घोड़े पर सवार होकर दुश्मन के तबाहशुदा कैपिटल को चीरता हुआ आगे बढ़ूंगा।
जो वैक्सीन है इसका कोई मकसद नहीं होगा, क्योंकि जो जंग हम शुरू करने वाले हैं उसमें कई ज्यादा लोग मारे जाएंगे। लेकिन आप लोगों का टोपी ड्रामा चल रहा है यार। आपको समझ में क्यों नहीं आ रहा?
I think guns are strong, and guns are shiny, and guns are sex.
लो हम आ गए, हमें रास्ता दो, इंसाफ हमारे हाथ में है। ये जायज है। हम क्या चाहते हैं?
As somebody who watched it live, it was one of the most riveting performances I have seen. The storyline, it really, really holds you. And that's what brings me to my question. Why is it that you decided to adapt this play in specific? And why did you use those elements of satire and absurdity? And since you're a filmmaker as well, you know, you use a multitude of mediums. Why did you decide to adapt it to theater in specific?
Okay, so the play was written in 1938 by a Czech playwright called Karel Čapek, and it was written 2 years before World War II. And the reason I had read this play when I was 16 years old, actually, in school, and the play always stayed with me. The themes of war, the play is essentially at the intersection of science and war. The synopsis, very briefly, is that, by the way, have people, because we performed the play at Alhambra in September last year, right across the hall in Hall 2. Has anybody over here seen the play? Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Then you'll know what I'm talking about, but I'll give a bit of a synopsis, is that a European superpower is gearing up to begin the next world war. And at the same time, there's this mysterious virus called the White Plague. It's a pandemic that has affected the whole world. It attacks the body from inside out. People's bodies are being ravaged by the thousands and millions. People are dying. No one has the cure except this one doctor from the slums who has discovered the cure. And he goes to the head of the state hospital and he says, I have discovered the vaccine and I'm willing to give it to the world for free, but on one condition. And that condition, we find out, ends up being that he tells them, I want the heads of state to agree to end all wars. So that becomes an impossible condition, then that moves the play forward. And that intersection of science, pandemic, virus, war, how entire industries are made, entire countries and industries and governance is kind of now structured around profiting from crises such as this, is such a timeless theme, unfortunately. And so it was always in my mind. And then when Corona happened, and pandemic and lockdown, it just became all the more relevant. So that kind of cemented my thing that I want to do it. I want to do it in Pakistan. Now, because of the Corona and because of the pandemic, it's become so timely right now also. And so I started developing it. I wanted to always do it in Urdu to make it accessible to a Pakistani audience. And while we were rehearsing it in September of 2023, we were going to put the first time the play ran was November 23. So while we were rehearsing, October 7th happened. And when that happened, the rehearsals took on sort of like a life of its own. We were very, very aware that what we were rehearsing was being played out in HD on our screens, on our phones, this genocide that was playing out. And no longer did I really have to research and reference World War II as much as I was. It was being played out in front of us in real time. And it kind of took a theme and a spirit of its own that history is bound to repeat itself unless we do something about it, unless we are. And so the theme of the play is speaking out against that, basically active resistance, that nothing is going to change in history. And like we've seen, it's going to keep continuing unless we take an active stand against it. So that's why I wanted to do it. That's why I wanted to adapt it. And I did adapt it to, I kept its production design in the kind of Nazi Germany, as you could see from the trailer, in terms of the costumes and the setting and all of that, but it was in Urdu. But I adapted several scenes to modernize it. Their use of multimedia, especially use of cameras, use of screens. I had like 2 projectors that were set up on either side of the stage that was projecting some scenes live, some was found footage from wars. And there was a reason for that also, to talk about the themes of propaganda. Again, there's so much that we're seeing through our phones, there's so much fake news, there's so much, there was so much to talk about that I could use the devices of multimedia, which I can get into if you'd like. But to answer your question as to why theater, because I am a filmmaker also, I've always loved the form of theater in its immediacy with the audience, and I wanted to break the fourth wall. I wanted to integrate the action in a way that involved the audience in the action and took the action to the audience also. There's a viscerality that comes with so the play is about a pandemic of this fictional virus called the White Plague, and the way it's described in the text is this grotesque, the symptoms are so grotesque. It's this leprosy type of disease that eats your body from inside out, and it produces the symptoms. And the way it's written about it, it was so, the way it looks, the way it feels, the way it smells, I wanted to bring that to the audience. And so one of the opening scenes, I don't know if we have the presentation that I can show pictures, but someone can tell me if we do. The opening scene was of a leper who has been affected by this disease, and we took a lot of pains to use special effects. And I took the action off the stage down there and kind of, had them go towards the audience. And the idea was borrowing from the vein of Artaud, a French dramaturg, and his theater of cruelty. I wanted to sort of like shock the audience and take this grotesqueness right up to them so that they could feel it and they could smell it and the idea for that is that you see the people who are being affected by crisis such as this, people who are either suffering from ailments such as this who don't get, oh, there we go. That's our actor who played one of the lepers, and he goes, and you can see the special effects over there. And after this scene, we go immediately into the world of, I guess I can use this? Okay. Where do I point it? Oh, okay. Okay. And immediately after this scene, we go into the world of the other side, which is the nexus of power. The other characters are the head of the state hospital, the dictator of the country, the baron, who is the largest sort of industrialist, who is the weapons manufacturer, who's aiding and abetting in this war, and kind of how this world is so removed from the other world of the decision makers who are really not affected by this because they're insulated by their power and their wealth, and how they're so far removed from it. So I wanted to bring the ground reality of this like up and close to the audience before we're whisked away into the rest of the play. And so I guess that's why theater, because the immediacy with the audience, and like I said, because we're seeing so much of this play out today, and because right now I think a lot of us feel that the veil has been lifted over a lot of how and why decisions get made. you know, by the powerful ruling elite. I think that's why I wanted to use, with theater you have the luxury, unlike film, to adapt it and to kind of keep it in real time and keep it relevant. You know, once you made a film, then you made that. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to make it as relevant as possible to the current times. I mean, there was so much in history that is already relevant, but because we're seeing so much of it play out now, I wanted to be able to, like I said, integrate the action, bring it to the audience. And so we had a lot of stuff where we used, you know, actors were coming out of there, they were going into the audience. There were some crowd scenes of a mob scene that comes at the end, where we had actors placed in the audience, and when they're chanting their pro-war chant, and you can see the effect of the propaganda of the state has been so successful in making people hungry and supportive of this war, and when they come down to the mob scene, the audience is kind of part of it. And again, to go back to the message of moral courage and active resistance, the idea is that if we're not speaking up against it, if we are just spectators watching it, and passive and not active, then what's going on and how are we going to change anything? So that's why the medium of theater.
Absolutely, and the way that you used it, the way that you know, use multimedia, all of these these are things that I will revisit, especially in the next set of questions. However, the next question I do have is directed towards Fatima Amjed. You have used dance and music, you know, also as an act in public to resist against the patriarchal notions that we have about these acts, because Pakistani society, especially due to colonization, has started seeing these things as something that are not a part of our culture that we need to disown. And your play Kaur is very integral to that, because it is a play that combines the realism of Punjab with musical theatre. So you have Gidda, Tappe, Boliyan that are so, you know, unique to our region. And my question to you is, why do you use musical theatre in specific to express these ideas?
So when I make theatre, I make it in a manner where I like to imagine if I was sitting in the audience, what would I want to watch? What would be easy for me to understand? How will I connect? So I make theatre in that way. And I'm a dancer, I train people, I have, there's so many things going on. Because of that, I feel, the reason why I did Kaur was, it's a very interesting story. I was watching this little interview by Dr. Arifa Saida, and she said somewhere in the middle where she says, she saw some people talking and when she was younger, and this one person said to her, this was a long time back, "Kinniya soniya lagdiyan ne bibiyan bachchiyan gandiyan." That stuck with me. And like you said, I'm sorry, but you said something in the beginning where you said, okay, it's become a taboo whatsoever. We are South Asians. Music and dance, it is our life, it is our blood. And no matter how hard we try, it will always remain there. It will be, and it is a privilege, truly, honestly. It is a matter of, I'm extremely proud of what we make, our music, our dance, our culture, our streets, every single thing. And so with Kaur, I felt, I made it initially because my dada, when I was younger, he used to say to us, Punjabi mein, ginti seekh lo, ya phir mausamo ke naam seekh lo. And we were young, and we'd be all, क्या कह रहे हैं, बिल्कुल नहीं सीखेंगे, कैसी बातें कर रहे हैं, used to brush him off. But I grew older, and then this very interesting thing that he used to do was, he used to, when you'd go, he would only talk in Punjabi, and when you would go and talk to him, and if you talk to him in Urdu, he wouldn't respond to it. He used to say, talk to me, this is my language, you talk to me in my language, because you are standing in my room right now. So he used to do those things. And I found it great, and because he migrated from Amritsar, and you could really tell that he misses home. He would talk about it. All of when he, in his final few days, I remember, he forgot everything about Lahore, and he would only talk about Amritsar. That really stuck with me. And because of that, I felt that I am connected. There is something that, you know, drives me and makes it most, what do you say, close to my heart. Which is why I started writing Kaur one fine day. And then again, the reason why it is a musical is because when I'm sitting in the audience, I understand musicals best. I like to look at dance, song and dance. And I want my people to be exposed to good music, good dance, good to nahi, just music and dance. It is important that we see these things. So I was adamant that it has to be a musical, and I don't think I know any other kind of theater. मुझे नहीं बनाना आता. तो जो मुझे आता है मैंने वो सब तरीका करने की कोशिश की.
And you did it so beautifully. It captured the hearts of the audiences, and that really shows in your work. And again, my question now would be for Lucy. You know, I had the chance to read Daughters, a translation of it, and I know that translations sometimes don't do justice to the actual text, but I still felt the depth of it. And it is a story that revolves around two friends. There's Martha and there's Betty, and they go across kind of this road trip with Martha's terminally ill father, Kurtz, because it's his last dying wish. And the novel weaves between, you know, a sense of humor and melancholy, and this feeling that you have when you have the sense of abandonment by your parents, and the mark that it leaves on you even in adulthood. So how was it reading your novel and then seeing it come alive on the screen when it was adapted into a film? And would you ever consider having it being adapted into theater on stage? And how would the experience be?
If I saw the movie the first time, I didn't enjoy it. I was shocked, in a way, really shocked. But this some lesson I've learned. It's as a writer, as a novelist, I control everything, every sentence, every comma, every dot. Everything is under my control. And as a novelist adopted for a movie, I'm totally out of control. I have nothing to say. Although I also wrote the screenplay together with the director, but in a movie there's so much more and so much less at the same moment than in a novel. So things like production design, music, editing, the actors, costume, makeup, it's all not my choice. And these things can change a story in a way I've never imagined before. And I've learned it's not, you know, it's not the story that makes a novel. It's the sound, it's the things you can read between the lines, and all the things hardly can be in a movie. So it's a hard lesson. But as a writer, you have to let it go. You have to give it away in the hands of the director, and it's her or his work then. And I go a step behind and say, just good luck with my novel. Yeah, but what was very impressive for me was to visit the film set one day. I couldn't believe it because it's so, you know, I spent 2 years in my 2-room apartment writing alone a novel, and then 2 years later I came to a film set with all the car park and the trailers and 100 people working on the set. And they spent $6 million for it, and it's hardly to understand what's going on. And it's a feeling like I'm God, you know, it's all mine, and it's all these things are happening right now because I spent 2 years alone at my desk. That was really overwhelming.
I'm sure it must have been an overwhelming experience because, again, like you mentioned, the idea of seeing your work come to life and feeling like, oh, this has been breathed life into. It turned from pages to actual people, and now they're speaking the words that I've written. Must have been an incredibly jarring experience at some level. And now I will redirect the questions again towards Clemens. We had a conversation yesterday in which you mentioned having written a play centered around true-to-life events, wherein a Jewish doctor during the Nazi era takes his and his son's life in 1938. You're also putting up a play recently that you mentioned about an Austrian investigative journalist's death, and you know how it's about remembrance and nostalgia. It pays homage to him. How do you navigate presenting these very politicized themes to tragicomedy in theater? And how do you think one can represent these very, very serious ideas in the way that you do using a comedic streak? How do you achieve that?
Yeah. You know, the funny thing is, I mean, maybe it's not a misrepresentation, but I'm not always funny, and it's not always comedy. But so really the thing is, just one aside, responding to Lucy when she said, you write a novel and everything, every sentence, every comma is yours, which holds true for plays. But then the director comes, and sometimes you don't recognize your play again, which I had this similar experience once with a play of mine, and I went to the premiere, and I was shocked. It was so bad, and all the nuances and all the wit and the humor and everything had gone, and everything that's between the lines, everything had, and I remember I was there with my agent, and back then I was still smoking, and after the play we went outside and I had a cigarette, and he said to me, Mr. Berger, you know one thing, from now on we're going to lie, which means to the director and the director of, I couldn't lie. But anyway, that was just besides. Back to your question, I'm much more comfortable with writing prose and novels, but I was always an enthusiast for the theater and loved the theater and actors and actresses, and I always loved, I don't know, that world and that environment. But most of my plays, except one, have been commissions. And most of the time I have to take commissions because I need the money. That's the first thing. And then it interests me. But I always try to kind of, when I get a commission, to turn it. It takes quite some time to think through it, to make it my project. And once I can make it my project, it feels different. And then I can start writing. And sometimes it's more or less, or it's a black comedy, and sometimes it's not, like the play we're staging right now, which is to commemorate a now for 10 years dead journalist who was back in the days the most prominent investigative journalist of Austria, and in these days and under circumstances like all the scandals he did unearth back then, which was a lot, which was incredible. And so that was kind of what interested me, being an investigative journalist, and what you have to do. It's kind of, you know, it's a little bit of Secret Service, it's a little bit of being a therapist, it's a little bit of being a rogue, and it's everything at the same time, you know, getting back channel information and so on. But now, the crazy, or let's say the tragic, and not really comical, but the tragic thing is that 10 years later, and he unearthed so many scandals, nothing is better, on the contrary. So that's kind of what I was writing about.
Thank you so much. That definitely brings a lot to light that I had, you know, reading your plays, because you also sent me a translation of it, and it was just so, it was about the one about the undertaker that you mentioned in the previous question. It was so riveting. I mean, and the way that you wrote the dialogues, it was incredible. And the next question again, now we are revisiting the idea of the use of multimedia that you did, Meher, because the Čapek play that you adapted was, again, written 2 years before World War II. And if you're discussing it in a similar vein, like, you know, I discussed Clemens' plays as well, because it was adapted during World War II. And the fact that you use multimedia to show to the viewer in lifetime how the propaganda machine works, then you also interact with the audiences, as you mentioned. You take the play to them, so they become involved in all of it. Can you discuss these devices that you used? And how did you manage to navigate censorship, especially because you are representing a really oppressive regime that does not allow its people to speak, and it's run by money-hungry, powerful elite? How do you think, and why do you think, is theater such a politicized medium?
Why do I think theater is such a politicized medium? It doesn't have to be. I remember when I was in my younger years, I thought, art and politics should be, they should be separated, and all of these stupid notions, because when you grow up and then you realize, oh, it's a very political world, then you can't really separate them, I suppose. There was this quote by a Palestinian poet, Marwan Maqul, that I paid testament to after the play, which was, I hope I remember it. He said, "In order to write poetry that is not political, I must be able to listen to the birds. And in order to hear the birds, the warplanes must be silent." So of course, as long as the warplanes are buzzing, or the drones now, then we were compelled to integrate that into our art. And art is such especially theater, because it's performing arts, and it's because it's energetic, and because it's kinetic and it's dynamic, it has that ability to transcend that energy to the audience. And then coming back to your question about using multimedia again and again, integrating the audience with the action and making them part of the play, essentially. So these were scenes from the lead up to, okay, so this is one of the scenes right in the middle of the play that I actually adapted. In the original play, it's a bunch of news reporters who come to the head of the state hospital. The head of the state hospital has broken his promise to the doctor, because the doctor said, "I'll give you this vaccine, please test it out and do the clinical trials in your hospital, but you cannot publish it to the world." And he doesn't state his reason why, and he's keeping that as a kind of, a secret, because he's going to use that as a tool to get them to bargain for world peace, essentially, when he can prove his results. But the state of the hospital, as often people who are appointed at positions of power who have not really earned it, like to brag about things. And so he holds this big press conference where he calls it the head of the state. And so that's happening over here. And in the original play, it was like I said, newspaper reporters who are coming and asking the head of the state hospital, who's played by our amazing actor Fawad Khan on the left over here. And I changed that so that it was a press conference with cameras. So there was a lot of cameras. The cameramen were over here. I was one of the cameramen over there. I was operating a live camera, so the actual scene that I was filming of the press conference was being projected onto the screens. And so the idea is that this is being projected into people's homes in real time everywhere. And he's bragging about the results of the vaccine, and that they've discovered the vaccine. And so he holds this big press conference, calls the head of the state. There's a lot of deference paid, of course, a lot of flowery words exchanged, as you do. And also the actor who's playing the dictator came down from within there. And so then the audience was suddenly the audience for the press conference also. So they were all taking part in it. So whenever then they would like erupt in cheers when they were giving a speech, the audience was kind of part of it. So it's like they're watching the press conference live actually taking place. Can we go forward? I think I'll just talk to the gods and it'll happen. And then he goes, back off he goes. Then that's, again, me taking him, basically, again, saying flowery words about, about the dictator, about the hospital. And can we go forward? And again. And so he goes off, and then we have this amazing news reporter who's kind of modeled after a Fox News reporter. And she was very, the way that we crafted her character and I rewrote this scene was kind of indicative of what we're seeing when we see reporters covering the news about Gaza, for example. Like the first question you're asked when you're saying anything of consequences, do you condemn so-and-so? Do you condemn this and that? And it's often deflecting. I mean, we see it so much that I don't even need to talk about it. So she's kind of signing off in her live speech, and the doctor who has seen all of this is very upset that that his boss has broken the promise, and so he comes to her and says, you know what, there's the cameras over here, I'm going to actually now reveal the truth, and he talks directly to the cameras, and by doing that I did want to break the fourth wall, so when he's talking to the cameras it's being projected, the audience is here live watching anyways. And it's what we're watching in our phones every day. When we see people at press conferences right now standing up and speaking up, let's say, about Gaza and being shut down right away. So this was kind of referencing that. So she's asking him, he's basically saying, look, the vaccine is mine, I developed it, this hospital has nothing to do about it, and I'm basically not going to give it to the world, I'm not going to release it until they called for world peace. And so she says, how dare you ask for world peace? What about the terrorists? Do you not condemn the terrorists? And then this kind of goes into the circular kind of questioning that we see when you're deflecting about questions like that. And so he speaks directly into the camera. The press conference is shut down. Yeah. And that was the end of, and then, he gets fired from the hospital and then he's sent back to the slums and, yeah. So the idea of, I use multimedia over here, and there was another scene later on when the Minister of Information and Propaganda, which is very much modeled after Joseph Goebbels, as it is, who was in the Nazi regime, the Minister of Information and Propaganda, and in that scene, he has basically told the dictator his strategy for how they are going to their strategy for propaganda in order to influence the public and the masses to become pro-war. And so after that, there was a transition and there was a set change into this set. Oh, the one that was there before. You guys can leave the presentation on. I used that, it was kind of like multi-purpose at that point. I also needed to have time to change the set, but during that time we basically saw what kind of propaganda he would have been releasing to convince the masses to support the war. And so there was not live projection, there was projections of found footage that I had from World War II and also the current genocide that's going on, as well as protests, university student protests that are happening all over the world, how they're being shut down, footage of surveillance, footage of people being censored. That was all being projected over music, and it was quite an emotional actually point, because when you integrate music with stuff that is actually happening, you've been watching this play that you've been laughing along and you've been it hits all the emotional notes, but when you see actual footage from actual wars, current and past, then again it just hits home even more so. So I think that was that, and there was a few other uses of multimedia in the play. But yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah, and it was incredibly well done. You feel like you are a part of the propaganda machine, and that was basically what it aimed to do.
Yeah.
And my next question is aimed at Fatima. Fatima, your play Kaur is set, as we discussed, in a very conservative Sikh society that is settled in Punjab during Amar Singh Chamkila's time in specific. And the very idea that you mentioned, these women strove to sing, to dance, to express themselves, and yet they were pushed back because of the very idea that something that they were participating in was so obscene, and those accusations, but they only really wanted to, express themselves, and all they got was lashback, as does the protagonist herself. And it still fits in the times of our society and what we currently go through as women. Would you call it a feminist piece that makes use of the musical format? And would you also term it an ode to female friendships?
I would be honored to call it a feminist piece. I would be honored if you call it a feminist piece. Because I like to believe that if a woman writes about any authentic experience of another woman or of herself, it is going to be a feminist piece. Us telling our stories is so we weren't allowed to do that for a very long time, were we? We weren't allowed to say. But I was researching a few months back for Kaur only, And I sat down because the music, again, was a very, very important part of our show. And I wanted to keep it very authentic, very Punjab. And I wanted to keep pieces that my audience could sing along. And I'm going to talk about a piece. Have you heard Madhania? Has everybody heard Madhania here? Yes? Have we? So the singer, the writer is trying to say, Madhania, hayo mere dadya rabba, kinna jammiya, kinna ne le janiya. किसकी बात कर रही हैं? एक लड़की पहली दफ़ा बैठ के बता रही है कि ये कितना जुल्म है मेरे साथ कि मैं अपने घर से कौन पैदा करता है, मुझे कहाँ चला जाना चाहता है. What do you think that is? That यही तो है, हम कहानी सुना रहे हैं अपनी. And so Kaur itself was, for me, I feel it was, because it is my story, I set it in a different time, I set it with different people, but for a very long time, I wasn't allowed to do theatre. I wasn't allowed to dance, and it was difficult in the beginning, and people would, again, dancing is another story. Theatre itself was a big deal for my family, for my extended family mostly. So when I wrote Sara Javed was our protagonist for Kaur, and I wrote her exactly the way that I was when I was younger, and the first scene that she has in the show, I wrote it exactly the way that it happened to me. The first time somebody told me, hey, you can't dance, I wrote it exactly that way. And I felt that there were so many women in the audience. Even today, I think you all can relate. कितनी चीज़ें होती हैं जिनसे हमें मना किया जाता है. छोटी-छोटी चीज़ें हो जाएंगी. लाल लिपस्टिक मत लगाओ, कमर सीधी करके बैठो. These things they're very small. They may not seem like a big deal to a lot of people sitting here. But for me, I think anybody should be able to do whatever they want as long as they're not harming other people in the process. And that's especially women, especially my sisters, all the women that helped me make this show. All of us had very similar stories. All of us had very similar experiences, which is why all of us, this one day we were rehearsing here, and Farheen Raza Jaffri and Shaygil, they were all with me, and the show was about the three of these friends who they all have different directions, and they're all struggling with one thing or another. And this one time, I remember, we were all sitting here in the same hall, Hall 1. We were sitting right here, our hands together, and on the stage, and there was nobody here, it was just us three. And we were talking about the show, and there's this line in the show where Sara Javed says, "Mere geet thode kanna lai nahi ne," which translates to, my songs are not for your ears, they're for your hearts. Mere geet thode dila lai ne, jinna dilain ch Rab vasta hai, for the hearts in which God resides. And I sing because I want a small place in the hearts where God resides, so I can just rest by on the side somewhere. And we all sat and we held our hands, and all three of us, we ended up crying for at least 30 minutes. And we kept talking about there were so many things that had happened to us, all three of us, and then other girls in the show also. And there were a lot of things that we added to the show because of that experience. We sat down and, Shay said, this happened to me. This particular person said this to me when I started singing. This particular person, Farheen says, okay, this particular person said, falan thing, which really hurt me. And so we kept adding as we went. And for me, when I was making Kaur, I wanted Kaur to be a shared experience of all of these women, not just mine. And, God made it happen. All of us, eventually were able to make it that way. And so coming back to your question, I'm sorry, but again, it was our intention, what we stand for at Beth also, that women should be able to sing and dance and be joyful and be happy and do whatever they want, without so many of these, terrible things that happen in the process, and so many things that they have to lose, because our main character, Sara Javed, she loses her brother, she loses her mom goes through a great ordeal, and these are things that happen to so many artists, and we don't talk about it. And then, and then she comes to this place or point of complete humility, and but she does get to create her own path and make her own career, and she gets to sing at the end. That's what we wanted, that this simple action of this girl being able to sing should be, I wanted that the entire show that is set around it, all the other characters, for me, it was my utopia, right? That all of these people should be able to accept her and love her for who she is, because I wrote her with all my heart. Farheen performed her with all her heart. And I wanted all of these people, everybody watching, to feel what this girl is feeling. It was not about, this was not a gendered thing. I wanted all men in my audience to feel, because there's so many things that men are not allowed to do for so many reasons. And I really hope, if anybody has seen it, I really hope you were able to, connect with it.
And with this, I would like to direct my last question again to Lucy. Lucy, your work as well uses Martha and Betty's friendship as the emotional core of the novel. So it's really focused on how important female friendships are. Would you say that you discuss themes relevant to women across the world that they can relate to? And how does your choice of medium impact that?
So it's not only about female friendship, what is an international topic, I would say. It's also about the relationship between fathers and daughters. And the daughters, they really need some love, some respect of their fathers, and they don't get it. And first I thought it's maybe a very special problem, a personal problem, but after the book came out, I realized it's not a personal problem. It's a lot of women can share this problem, that they always in their life trying to get some respect, some love. Just the simple sentence, I love you, it's so hard to get from a father. And it's so, I don't know why, but it's so simple and so hard to get. And so I travel around with this novel because it's translated into 8 languages, and everywhere I met women with the same wish, and we all suffering in the same way. And yeah. And the second question, why I choose literature or novels as my medium is, it's pretty cheap. I don't need that much. I need a paper and a pen and a notebook maybe, and it's really good. I'm so independent. Yes, thank you. I can do it wherever I am, and I can do it at home. I can do it in a train or wherever, and I think I love the independence. You know, if you write a play, you need a stage. If you write a screenplay, you need the whole film team and a lot of money, and I don't need all this.
That is an incredibly important point that you raised, Lucy, absolutely, because all of the people that were on the panel today are multifaceted artists that use a multitude of mediums, and that's the beauty of this panel and all of the people that are involved, because they're involved with so many things and so many forms of art. And that is what our creative industry needs all across the world. And I hope that this panel talk, especially about theater, brings across conversations where there can be more collaborative efforts to represent the ideas that are important to us, from authoritarianism to climate change to gender issues, all that we want to see in the world and that are so important to explore. Thank you so much, all of you, for your time. And thank you so much, all of you, for watching.